Hi, my name is Gabriela, and today I'll be reviewing a speech about the benefits of electric drive vehicles. This presenter's main claim was that electric drive vehicles will effectively replace internal combustion engine vehicles in the next 6 years. For simplicity, I will be referring to electric drive vehicles as EDV and internal combustion engines as ICE. I will be responding to my opposers following three claims in this refutation. First, electric vehicles are already successful in achieving the range of ICE vehicles. Second, electric vehicles are more money efficient and more environmentally benign. And third, the future for EDV vehicle market is already prompt. The major problem with the initial claim and the overall argument made here is the presenter has chosen the Tesla Model S 90D as a base vehicle for all of his comparisons. This model, which runs for about $109,500 as a base price, is not a viable vehicle to generalize, as the majority of the world in the U.S. Will not be able to afford the top-of-the-line EDV. I looked up a cheaper EDV called the Tata Indica Vista EV, which runs for about $13,500, which is a more affordable option. But when we look at these more realistic models, the shortcomings of the EDVs start to come out, and these electric cars have a very limited range, and this is due to the low density of the batteries compared to the Tesla or some of the more expensive electric vehicles or the fuel of the ICE vehicles. These vehicles, the electric ones, also take a really long time to recharge, the cheaper ones. The Model S has a lot shorter charging time, usually between 6 and 8 hours, which isn't a big deal if you plug in it at night, but if for some reason you run out in the middle of the day, that's a really long time to wait around to start driving again. This compares really unfavorably to the simple, quick process of filling your tank up with gas and continuing on your way. In response to the claim that EDVs are more environmentally benign and money efficient, I will present statistics that show how EDVs actually have a negligible impact on emissions. There was a study done in LA and New York where in each city 500,000 electric cars were substituted for the same number of combustion vehicles. In Los Angeles, peak ozone levels were reduced from 200 to 199 parts per billion. In New York City, the effect was completely undetectable and remained at its peak at 190 parts per billion. Vinod Khosla, a prolific investor in green technologies, proves that electric cars are quite uneconomical through what he calls the Mississippi test. If an EDV car costs $2,000 more than an ICE car, no one will buy it. If it is not going to reach the average American in Mississippi, then we cannot realistically believe that it is a product economical or useful enough for the whole world to be using in 6 years. Besides the extra cost of the car and the opportunity cost of charging time, the electric car batteries are quite expensive. In fact, they are the most expensive aspect of these vehicles, and new technologies are increasing costs further. Though even lead-acid batteries, which are in older cars, are still expensive due to the increasing cost of lead. And the last claim is that the market is ready for this change. This is a very generalized claim. The wealthy and upper middle class that can afford luxuries such as EDVs may be open to buying new cars, but the poor working class is in no position to simply throw out current cars in order to buy an EDV. Like the professor said in his critique of this speech, anyone who bought a car in the past 6 years is not going to be willing to simply like throw out their car and buy a new one, and with no return costs or anything. In conclusion, neither EDVs nor ICEs are really the best method. The best method and most realistic for the next 6 years would be public transportation, economically and environmentally. Public transportation helps reduce energy consumption and is in the long run cheaper in general for all Americans. Electric cars simply transform energy consumption from one form to the other.
All right, structurally everything is set up pretty well at the beginning of the speech. When you got to the first supporting point, I do think that you kind of start with a piece of evidence, an example, instead of giving us the counterclaim. But it is a good example when you talk about the difference between the cost of the Tesla model and what the other viable options are. I don't know, the Tata Vista, that sounds like it's a toy, the Tata Vista. $13,000, that does sound like it is affordable. So if I was going with that Mississippi test, I might be thinking, well, that's something that maybe people could afford. But I do think that you indicate that there are plenty of reservation issues here, primarily, the recharge issue and the range issues that you're talking about. I think that those things matter. One of the things that might make this argument more effective would be a simple comparison that everybody here could understand. If your battery on your phone goes out, that's kind of a problem for you. If the battery on your car goes out, that's a real big problem for you. So you've got that sort of issue. Holy criminy, everybody's disappeared. They're all gonna miss the pop quiz here at the end of the evening. Damn. All right. So I thought that was a pretty good argument. You don't really respond to the advocate's particular claims, except when you do talk about the fact that they're dependent on the Tesla model to make all of these favorable comparisons. On the second argument, when you're talking about the environmental impact, I thought you had very good counterclaim evidence here suggesting that the impact on the ozone layer, not the ozone layer, the ozone particulate matters are going to be negligible, that they weren't detectable in the one place and that there was such a slight variation in the other that it would hardly matter. I don't know that that's the same kind of pollution that the advocates would be talking about, but at least you quantify yours, and I don't remember what the advocates said at all. This would be a good place maybe for a little bit more comparative statement. Your argument about the Mississippi test, I think that seems like it would fit better on the first point than on this environmental cost issue here. And then you talk about batteries, but there's not really, you just basically mentioned there's a difference between the kinds of batteries that we're using. That whole argument that we heard earlier about lithium would probably apply to the point that you're making. So if you had some of that data, for instance, that would have been maybe a good way to go with what the environmental effects are and what the costs are going to be. On the thing that the market's being ready, I thought that I don't want to say that you were currying favor by quoting me, but the idea is pretty straightforward. I think that's a pretty straightforward point. Anybody, how many people buy cars every year? They're not going to suddenly say when the new year comes along, well, I've got to get this electric car and replace it. In the 6-year cycle, that seems to, I don't know how long the average person holds on to their car nowadays, but I do think I've read that someplace it's a lot longer than it used to be. I know my parents, I swear they traded out their car every 2 years and got something new. And I don't think anybody does that anymore unless they're leasing it. Yeah. But I mean, they were always buying. They never leased a car. They just bought cars, you know, and traded it in and got a new one. That's because they were hard on their cars. The last argument that you make, in essence, says that we're trading off one source of energy for another that's equally problematic, but you don't really have any information on that. That argument doesn't get developed, and it's probably a good argument to make, but it's one that doesn't, you know, like I said, have any content here. And you kind of ran out of time, so, all right.